world or some other place, we are there to grow and not simply to suffer. Very often we associate suffering with growth. We take it for granted that the individual, if he's become a greater expert in our own field of living or thinking. In large terms, ambition is the impulse to get ahead, to do things, to improve one's material estate. Ambition has caused all the miseries the world has ever known, because in a world in which there are limited resources, there is no place for the aggrandizement of the individual. Now, the opposite of ambition is not inertia. Many people think that if their ambitions weaken, they are dying while yet they live. This is not essentially true. Ambition exists and can be used, but ambition should be devoted and dedicated to the definite labor of improving all things. Ambition should be the eternal hope of the individual that the world collective will find peace, happiness, and security. We should be ambitious for principles, but not ambitious primarily for profit. If we do all that we can to fulfill the impulse within ourselves to make life better for those around us, we have probably the highest ambition that we can know. Another tremendous pressure within us that is getting us into constant difficulty is selfishness. Selfishness is the mysterious attitude within ourselves that tells us that we should benefit most from anything that happens. Selfishness is self-centeredness, but in truth it is not self-centeredness, because the real self is not centered in that way at all. The real self, with a capital S, is universal. There is one self, from which all other selves are dependencies. They are fragments in the great mosaic of one eternal principle of life and integrity. Therefore, selfishness, really, as interpreted in the old philosophies, is man's selfish hope that all will be well with all. Selfishness is the ability of the individual, in the higher sense of the term, to be as thoughtful and considerate of others as he expects them to be of him. Selfishness may be fulfilled by living better than we have ever lived before. And in living better, we may be apparently focusing upon ourselves. But this is not wrong if, having attained to better, we use it to serve the common good. All selfishness should be an urge or an impulse to improve in order to be more useful. But selfishness which seeks to attain a superiority for the individual over those around him is contrary to natural law. Another common denominator of our negatives is fear. The individual is in a worried state. He fears the world in which he lives, and he most fears his fellow man because he cannot read the thoughts that dominate those around him. He is quite aware that he may be constantly the victim of a conspiracy. Fear has been tremendously exaggerated in recent years by a variety of literary productions and through the media. The media constantly tells us of the terrible things that are happening. Now, these terrible things may be really happening. We're not denying that. But the impact upon ourselves is fear. We read all kinds of books about secret organizations that are seeking to undermine our world, and we become terror-stricken. Fear is definitely man's anxiety about the unknown, that which cannot be easily explained, that which seems to be hidden behind something that we cannot actually investigate, but upon which we can bestow all kinds of frightful proportions. This is fear, and many people are suffering from it today. The wise have never been afraid. And this is something that is very important for us to think of now. There is no need for anyone to be afraid of anything except his own mistakes. And these he can rationalize and understand if he wants to. The fear of the unknown develops all these negative anxieties because the individual recognizes the unknown as he sees it or senses it today as a vast uncertainty, a chaos, a kaleidoscopic mass of conspiracies, and he does not know which way to turn. The ancients feared neither life nor death. They feared neither the enemy or the false friend. But having come to a full acknowledgement of the law, they realize that there is no place in the universe for fear. There is no place in the universe in its natural state where there is anything that should cause man unreasonable anxiety. The only possible, legitimate source of anxiety would be natural disasters over which man has no control. But even these have their place, and natural disasters follow intimately upon the corruptions of society. Fear, therefore, is simply a hypnotizing, demoralizing, negative force. And it doesn't make any difference how we view it or how we measure it. The individual, as an eternal creature, living under an eternal plan, guided by an eternal wisdom, and protected by an eternal love, has nothing to fear. He has only to be afraid of his own mistakes. He is afraid, perhaps, that the negative part of his own nature will dominate him. If it does, it is because the good part has never had a chance. If, however, he really wants to overcome fear, he can do so. Because all fear is based upon uncertainty. It is based upon misinterpretation, misunderstanding, and the bestowing upon the unknown of malevolent factors. Out of the remote past, man suffering from all kinds of disagreements and disputes and dislocations in society, finally decided that there must be a devil somewhere. There must be an evil spirit that is doing these things. Certainly God would not afflict us with plagues and pestilences. There must be an anti-God. There must be an enemy of God. And this enemy is continually conspiring to thwart the purposes of deity. Buddha, I think, had as good an answer to this as anybody, because he was also confronted by the learned of his day with a difficult problem to solve, like the problem of Caesar's penny. So when they asked Buddha about the place of evil in the plan of things, he said very simply, if God permits evil, he is not God. If he cannot prevent evil, he is not God. And they had no answer for it. And this point has been carried on down to give a lot of thought to things. I think probably one of the nicest statements of it that I know is a pleasant little story in which two little boys leaving Sunday school got involved in a conversation concerning the devil. One little boy said to the other, "Do you believe in the devil?" The other one said, "No, of course not. It's like Santa Claus. It's your father." We have plagued the world with devils since the beginning, and it's been very nice to be able to shift our mistakes on them. If, as is believed in the Middle Ages, there were demons under the front steps of your house, and they even came in and sat next to you in the pew in church, if this type of thing was real, then everybody could sit back and admit happily and cheerfully that it wasn't his own fault. Nothing that goes wrong is our own fault. We change that now. We don't have a devil to blame anymore. But we have politics, and we have economics, we have industry, we have international relations. All these things now take the place of the devil in one way or another and make it possible for us to feel that we are not to blame for anything. It's all stacked against us. Well, no philosophy of this kind can ever pull us out of the doldrums. It simply gets us in deeper than we were before. Let's take a very simple look from a Greek standpoint on this situation. The Greeks were convinced, in their own way, that there was one sovereign principle. That this sovereign principle can be called God, or it can be called life, or it can be called infinite mind, whatever you want to call it. It is one eternal principle, as Pythagoras pointed out. All divisions into multiplicity take place within this unity. There is nothing outside of totality. Therefore, all that exists within totality. It is a differentiation of one principle into an infinite diversity of manifestations. But as they all come from the one, and that one is good, all of these manifestations are by nature and substance good. The world in which we live is a mystery to people, and to all of us to a great degree. For some reason which rests only in the divine consciousness, the individual is not born with a full apperception of the unity of life. He is not born with his mind already set in the direction in which it should go. The reason why we have not all been born perfect. There is a reason why virtue must be achieved. It is not thrust upon us. Virtue comes to the individual as a personal choice. The power that created man gave him the power to be right, because it gave him the ability to decide, to explore, to contemplate upon the phenomena of life. And it gave him the great textbooks which were necessary for his own salvation. Of these, in most nations, the greatest of these textbooks is the universe itself, which he can gradually probe and explore. The second textbook is the sacred writings that have descended to all peoples from ancient times. These are very largely summations of moral and ethical principles, the laws of living. The third textbook is man's own body, in which in miniature all the processes of nature play out. That which is bad for the body of the individual is bad for his world. Man was placed here to gradually unfold his own consciousness, to gradually open himself to ever-increasing and improving levels of consciousness, until finally he would be aware of and one with the one principle at the root of life. This was therefore a school. And it was a school in which millions and billions of little atoms, which are in the body of God, are growing up. This school has its rules, its laws, its principles. This school teaches certain necessary subjects. And the school of life is probably the most rejected but most necessary of all educational institutions. The individual is never frustrated in his ability to learn. It is his inclination to learn that is usually at fault. After we begin to think about this, we realize that the entire pattern, the entire program, has as its real substance that it shall produce the enlightened person. And it shall produce it because that individual earns that enlightenment by his own conduct, by his own insights, by his own efforts. It is not bestowed. It is revealed and released through him by his own efforts, by his own indefatigable determination to find the answer to himself. Many ancient peoples gave much thought to this, and they realized that in some way there must be a means or a method by means of which the individual